Good morning, everyone. I really want to welcome you to this webinar today on digestive health. I'm super excited about it. Digestive health and the whole gut is like one of my favorite topics to discuss with regard to health, and you're going to see why as we get into this. But we're going to cover today some of the 6 overlooked causes of digestive health disorders. And it's a sad case, really, how overlooked these things are in our medical establishment. We tend to give symptom relieving medicines to take care of heartburn or gas or bloating or indigestion, or we tell people just take this little purple pill and you can eat anything, and it's just the wrong message to give. And so we've got a nation really of unhealthy, chronically sick people, as you know, and about 70% of our $3 trillion healthcare expenditure goes to just managing symptoms of chronic disease and never really getting to the root cause. Today, I hope you see how the digestive system is part of the root cause, and we'll get into how it's affecting our health and what you can do really starting tonight, today, to overcome some of these symptoms. So I'm excited to get into this, and with no further ado, let's do that. So here we go. There it is. There it is. There I was 10 years ago on the left, very overweight, very unhealthy, very inflamed. I had fatty liver. I had elevated triglycerides through the roof. And I was just generally very unhealthy. I was going through a rough patch in my life. I used food as a medicine to calm my anxiety and my depression. And as you can see, I did a good job there. But the end result was not anything good. And, you know, I got worked up for hepatitis and for cirrhosis and for HIV, and you know, they were worried about cancer, but no one ever asked me what I was eating. No one ever asked. And look, I knew better. You know, I'm a holistic healthcare provider, but sometimes our emotions get the best of us, and that was the case here, and it really, really destroyed my health. And then here I am 10 years later, back down to my high school weight, and fatty liver's totally gone, pre-diabetes gone, triglycerides normal, inflammatory markers exactly where they should be, and have sustained all of this now for several years with some of the things we're going to talk about today. Interestingly, I just did a real age versus chronological age quiz the other day from Dr. Oz, and I'm 55 years old this year, but my real age was 48. So I'm happy about that, and I will practice what I preach, and you know, I want the same things as you, health, and without being on a bunch of medications. So let's get into this. And so why are you here today? I hope we address all of this. Let me back up. I'm sorry. And get to your, you know, reason you came today. But a lot of people are here because they want to know what's going on with my digestive health, and why can't someone else figure it out for me? And I'm tired of taking a pill just to manage a symptom without actually getting to the root cause. What is the method to get to the root cause? And we're going to talk more about that today. Why is the conventional approach not good enough? And look, I'm going to tell you how it's actually making you worse. And this is not hidden from anybody. We all in healthcare know this. Medical doctors know this. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. But a lot of the symptom relieving approaches are actually making the symptoms worse in the long run, and also adding serious potential downside for other diseases. And then I want to leave you with a long-term strategy for health, and it really all starts in the gut. We're going to go straight to root causes here today, because the symptom is always the last thing that shows up. It's never the first thing that shows up. there's always some sort of breakdown. And, you know, in healthcare, in business, in manufacturing, they always try to get to the root cause. And you may have heard this before, the 5 whys. You just keep asking why. Why? Well, and you get an answer. Why? Why is that breaking down? Why? Why? We don't do that too well in healthcare. We don't really use the 5 whys. And if doctors actually spent time asking, they get to the root cause. Sometimes we go on a trip and we come home and we have diarrhea for months. That's a starting point for some people. Some people start off with symptoms after antibiotics. Some people start out with symptoms after a food poisoning event. I mean, the symptoms are, again, the last thing that show up when there's really a root cause. And in functional medicine and in good digestive health consultation, we keep digging for this. Why? Why? When did it happen? What happened? What happened afterwards? When did you first notice this? What was the first thing you noticed? What happened? What did it make you sick? How did it make you sick? And we keep digging and digging until we get to the root cause of the symptom. So really, really important, especially in digestive health, because as you're going to see here, the gut health is connected to everything. So look, we're healthy, right? We're born healthy generally, and we're meant to be healthy. Our body is designed with amazing functions to help us be healthy, remain healthy, stay healthy. And then something triggers a symptom. And what we're seeing here is that triggers, right? And again, I mentioned it earlier, could have been that antibiotic, that trip you took, that you weren't breastfed, you were not vaginally delivered. All that makes a huge difference. And so what is the trigger that's causing certain health problems? Now, 70% of the immune system is in the gut, 70%. And so when the gut health is bad, when it's not healthy, when it's infected, we'll get into more of that, like what that looks like. Autoimmune disease can be turned on. And because the immune system's triggered, the immune system is like upregulated, and after a while, it could start attacking itself. That's what an autoimmune disorder is. And right now, we see that autoimmune disorders in the United States are growing at a faster rate than cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease is still the leading killer in America, but autoimmune disease is rapidly growing, with some 80 million Americans having an autoimmune disorder. That's a serious number. And the autoimmune drugs you can't get away from when you turn on your TV. They're all over the place. These things run anywhere from $60 to $120 to $200,000 a year. And you know how they work? They suppress the immune system. And all you got to do is listen to the side effects on the TV. You could get more infections. You could have more colds. You could increase your risk for cancer. The immune system there in our body is designed to keep the outside out and protect the inside. And when we have an autoimmune disorder and take a medication for it, we're really shutting down the immune system. And it's not the approach to really address these things. And so what I want to get to is getting back to being healthy and not letting our immune system run out of control. So today we're going to cover the 6 overlooked causes of digestive disorder, hyper or hypochlorhydria. This has got to do with stomach acid, pancreatic fatigue, which is our digestive enzyme, SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, food sensitivities or food allergies. We're going to talk about leaky gut, which 25 years ago when that came out was laughed at, but now is making its way into the medical journals. And then infections that are deep rooted in our gut that sometimes are hard to difficult to diagnose, and many physicians don't even know where or how to start figuring these things out. Now, the gut is the master gear for the whole body. Everything is connected to it. It's like this center gear here, and when it's not turning when it's not turning correctly, it can affect the joints. It can affect the immune system, which we already talked about. It can affect the skin with skin disease. It can affect the brain with brain fog. It can affect just about everything because this center gear is touching all of the other systems in the body. And I want to back up for a second. This is where functional medicine really gets to root causes, because in functional medicine, we're not looking at symptoms, we're looking at systems. What about that system has broken down? Why has that system broken down? And the symptoms can be varied, right? Sometimes people's digestive system breaks down, but they get autoimmune disease. There we go, we're back. Of our serotonin is produced in the gut, not in the brain. It's produced in the gut. There's over 100 trillion microorganisms, right? You've heard of the microbiome. When you've heard of the microbiome, I'm sorry here. Okay, back at it. You've heard of the microbiome, which 100 trillion cells. Now there's 10 times more of these things living in us and on us than actually make us up. So when we're born, we're about 99% human. When we are closer to death, or even right now as adults, we're more bacteria and bugs than we are human cells, which I find very interesting. We've already covered this fact. 70% of the immune system is in the gut. And it is our second brain, right? When you say you've got a gut reaction to something, that's something to pay attention to. That's something certainly to listen to and pay attention to. I'm just going to take a quick look here and make sure we're still recording. Looks like it. Okay, great. So let's get into this digestive sequencing. There's a order in which our digestive system should operate, right? And it starts at the mouth, goes through our body, through the intestinal tract, and out our anus and into the toilet. That really is a hollow tube. You see that image here. It's a hollow tube that is in our body, but the tube is hollow, and that tube is designed to absorb nutrients, absorb macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, absorb vitamins, but keep out bacteria, keep out things that don't belong in our body. And that tube can be affected by so many things that we're going to cover in this talk and break down the tube. And then those things get into our body and, like I said before, upregulate and trigger disease in just about any system. It all starts in the mouth, right? Digestion starts in the mouth. And it starts with one mechanical breakdown of food by chewing it and breaking it from bigger pieces to smaller pieces. And additionally, with the saliva in the mouth. In the saliva is a digestive enzyme called amylase. Amylase starts the breakdown of carbohydrates. And so improper chewing will bypass the initial breakdown of carbohydrate and can cause digestive health problems further on down the line. So this morning I drank a smoothie, which I rarely do, but had a hankering for it. And so this morning I did a berry, plant protein, mushroom, maca smoothie, very tasty. But I swished it around in my mouth rather than just chugging it down, or worse, even drinking it through a straw, because I know that the digestive enzymes in the mouth start the breakdown of those carbohydrates. I actually even chew it a little bit as well to stimulate and move that that saliva around to stimulate that carbohydrate breakdown. So very important step here in the sequencing of digestion and absorption. And these are key roles of the gut: digestion and absorption. Now we're going to go through this whole system almost organ by organ with regard to digestion. So let's get into the stomach acid. Look, stomach acid is important, right? It's at a pH of 1 or 2, really, and it could burn a hole through just about anything. And in order to, the body protects that with thick mucosa in the stomach, and it doesn't burn a hole in our stomach, unless, of course, you have an imbalance. One big imbalance that we see in the gut is with a bacteria called H. pylori. H. pylori is just a bacteria. It lives in the gut. It can cause reflux. It can cause heartburn. It can cause ulcers. And when I was in school, we used to think ulcers were caused by cigarettes, alcohol, and stress. And, back in the day, even before drugs were around, they would cut the vagus nerve, one of the major nerves going from the brain into the digestive tract, into the gut, all the way into the reproductive organs. They would just cut it. And that would tell the brain would not have a signal to tell the stomach to produce acid. And I did see patients who had this procedure done. Now, of course, their digestion was affected forever from that point. What does the acid do in the stomach? The acid in the stomach is the first step in breaking down protein. Remember, we said the first step of breaking down carbohydrates was in the mouth with saliva. Then the first place to break down protein is in the stomach with acid. And if we don't have good, healthy amounts of acid in there, or we just shut it off for some reason, which we'll get into, we don't digest protein very well. So, 20 years ago, a physician in Australia discovered this H. pylori and was laughed at because of these old models of health that we believed. And it wasn't until he actually his wife, and his son drank H. pylori, gave themselves stomach ulcers, and then reversed the whole process with an antibiotic. So this is where a good antibiotic is helpful. And if you have stomach acid issues, if you burp a lot, if you have reflux, you may have too much acid in your stomach from this H. pylori. It's a simple test your physician can do in the office, and it's a simple treatment with an antibiotic and some with Pepto-Bismol. Bismuth in Pepto-Bismol also is antimicrobial. I do see this, but I see on the flip side dilute stomach acid, which affects digestion as well, because if we dilute the acid with antacids like Tums, or over-the-counters like Prilosec, or things like prescription drugs like proton pump inhibitors to decrease that acid, a couple things happen when that happens. It's not just decreasing the acid. The acid production changes, right? It increases. When the acid increases, it becomes more alkaline. And so you're not able to digest your protein. Now, stomach acid also is the first barrier from bacteria getting into our gut, right? A lot of our food, either we don't wash, or, maybe you live by the 5-second rule and it falls on the ground and you eat it anyway. Or you're in a restaurant and can't control all the cleanliness. Well, stomach acid is there to kill germs, bacteria, viruses, things that are on our food, so it doesn't penetrate further into the intestinal tract. If we neutralize that stomach acid with antacids, whether they're over the counter or prescription, that first line of defense, that first protective mechanism is no longer available, and those bacteria then make their way into our small intestine. And we're going to get into small intestine bacterial overgrowth shortly, but we can see that neutralizing the stomach acid has a couple detrimental effects. One, you don't digest your protein. And when there's poor protein digestion, it moves through the digestive tract and putrefies, and will give you very foul smelling gas. That's one indication of putrefaction. And then the toxins get reabsorbed back into our blood and our body, and now we're circulating putrefied proteins or improperly broken down amino acids, again, upregulating our immune system. The other downside of too little acid in the stomach is this bacteria can make its way further down the line where it's absolutely not supposed to be. So stomach acid, too much or too little, neither is good, and just managing the symptoms with an antacid or some other way is not smart. What else dilutes this is also something very common that we just need to touch on here, is drinking fluids with our meals. When we drink fluids with our meals, we dilute this acid. That slows the whole digestive process down. Another thing that slows down the digestive process and dilutes this acid is iced drinks. The stomach acid is designed to work at body temperature. Digestive enzymes are designed to work at body temperature. And so when we pour iced drinks down on them, it slows the whole process down. The body has to stop digestion, it has to warm things back up, and then it can start digestive. In that process of slowing it down, again, we can see maldigestion, putrefaction of proteins occurring. So one thing to avoid is drinking fluids with your meals. I recommend stop drinking 30 minutes before and don't drink anything for 30 to 60 minutes after. Totally avoid iced drinks with your meals if you don't want to dilute the stomach acid. And here's a test that can be done with to find H. pylori here in the gut, and immune system markers, IgG, immunoglobulin G, is upregulated in this person. This is a fasting whole blood test. It can also be done with a breath test. So if you have these symptoms, certainly talk to your doctor about it and see if they can run this test. Now let's talk about the pancreas for a second as well. The pancreas, this organ right here, is important next step in digestion, in that it releases digestive enzymes into the small intestine to break down food further. Enzymes like amylase, right? We heard about that in the mouth. Protease, lipase, these things that end in ase are enzymes. They break down chemicals and into smaller parts. They speed up the process. Sometimes if we've overburdened the pancreas with alcohol or with too much food, eating too often, too frequently, and the pancreas is constantly releasing enzymes, it can become fatigued as well and not work as well when it comes to digestion. Some, when pancreatitis happens, they place people on a fast, and they basically don't let them eat for periods of time so that the pancreatic enzymes in the pancreas can regenerate and rebuild itself. One also step to help improve digestion if you have pancreatic insufficiencies is to use a pancreatic enzyme, and you can get these. They come in plant forms. Personally, I like the ones that come from pigs. Porcine pancreatic enzymes are very powerful. They can be additional help in digesting carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And sometimes people just need to do this for a period of time to aid in their digestion. The goal, though, is to allow that organ to heal and rebuild so that it can do its work on its own. This organ is also important in that it releases insulin and glucagon, two really important hormones with regard to blood sugar balancing. That's a whole other talk, which we'll do another time. But I want you to know this organ has this process of releasing enzymes as well as releasing hormones. It's a very important organ in our body. It can become damaged with alcohol use. It can become damaged or sluggish with overuse. And I've seen these results in lab tests before where we can see there's pancreatic insufficiency. And so people don't digest. And when you don't digest, you don't absorb, because you're not really what you eat, you are what you absorb. Now, here we are into the small intestine a little bit further. We talked about small intestine bacterial overgrowth. It's very common when people are taking antacids, Tums, Prilosec, proton pump inhibitors. And when that stomach acid is slowed down, it can cause bacteria to work its way into the small intestine. And you can, I mean, this is a miserable condition. You get frequent nausea, but what I really see is a lot of bloating and gas and abdominal pain and cramping with people, and they talk about it. And the gas that is produced is very, very foul smelling and has a hang time, meaning it'll hang around in a room for way longer than you would think. It's really that in and of itself, with the gas and the bloating and the abdominal pain and the cramping and the smell, is a good indicator of a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This can also be diagnosed with a in-office breath test. They can measure methane and some other gases coming out of this area. It is not an easy thing to treat. There are some antibiotics that can be used. They're super expensive. And then those wreak havoc elsewhere. There is a newer antibiotic that's not absorbed by the body that kills the bacteria in the area. There are herbal preparations, which is my bent on treating this, and I've used with good success herbal preparations like berberine and hydrochloric acid, right? We talked about acid in the stomach, so we want to get acid into this area. Golden seal and different herbs, and it's a process. You got to take these things 3 times a day, and then you've also got to alter the food you're eating. And there's what's called the FODMAP, FODMAP, which is a dietary recommendation of lower carbohydrate foods that don't stimulate more and more growth of this bacteria in the area. So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, if you have this, these symptoms are pretty common. Again, you got to find a good functional medicine provider who knows how to test this and then also knows how to treat it. Some of the GI physicians now are getting a handle on this and understanding SIBO as well. I can't say all of them do, but certainly more and more of them are. If you have these kinds of symptoms, you know, and it's worth getting evaluated. Now, also within the small intestine is something that's called leaky gut syndrome. And 20 years ago, when it first started coming out, people laughed about it. And this is what it sounds like. The gut becomes leaky, and things that should not end up in our bloodstream end up there. Remember, we talked about the hollow tube and how it's supposed to keep some things out but absorb nutrients. Well, when the gut becomes leaky, things get in like amino acids and proteins that again trigger the immune system. And when the immune system gets triggered, it can cause a breakdown in other systems, causing symptoms like rashes or fatigue or brain fog or autoimmune disease. Now, what causes leaky gut? Antibiotic use does. Some people take antibiotics too frequently, or grew up taking them very frequently, or are trying to treat acne or Lyme disease. But when we continually take antibiotics, we're breaking down this barrier that is designed to protect us from the outside world. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are another thing that breaks down this barrier. Alcohol consumption breaks down this barrier. This barrier breaks down with SIBO, so Tums, proton pump inhibitors, over-the-counter Prilosec break this whole area down. Infections that I've seen people get from a food poisoning, right? An accidental, unanticipated, and certainly unwanted food poisoning from a restaurant or something from your fridge. You know, here's a big ubiquitous thing that's causing leaky gut problems: glyphosate. That stuff is sprayed on our food as a weed killer. You might know it as Roundup. A lot of the non-organic and GMO or genetically modified foods, corn in particular, soy, to some extent wheat, are designed to be resistant to poisons like glyphosate. And manufacturers like Monsanto make these seeds, sell them to farmers. The seeds don't pollinate, so the farmer is beholden to buy these seeds all the time, every year, to replant, because the seeds don't germinate, they don't pollinate. And so inorganic farming allows them to spray this stuff all over. Glyphosate is an antimicrobial in the dirt and is also an antimicrobial in our gut. So it's killing bacteria in our gut, as it is also leading to leaky gut problems. Now let's take a look at what that looks like in this next slide. This is the intestinal barrier. These microvilli here increase surface area so that food can be absorbed into the body. And you can see it's right connected into the bloodstream here. And also within this microvilli are lymphatic vessels, right? The lymph system is part of our immune system as well. And within the lymphatic vessels in the intestinal tract, this is in the small intestine, is absorption of fat-soluble nutrients, fat, and fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K get absorbed here and make their way into, sorry, the intestinal tract. Now, when we break down this barrier, things from our digestive tract get absorbed through the cell and into the bloodstream, or these junctions here, called tight junctions, can get broken down as well, as you can see here, and proteins and immunoglobulins and other things that should not be in the into the bloodstream make their way in. And leaky gut is a serious problem affecting people who have had, again, non-steroidals, medications, eating a poor diet, etc., breaking this down. Things that do help it back are, of course, the usual whole food, plant-based foods, things like glutamine. L-glutamine can help repair this. L-glutamine is an amino acid. It comes from cabbage, or in fact, before they discovered that glutamine could heal this, people would drink cabbage juice, and they didn't know what was in cabbage juice. They called it vitamin U for ulcers because they knew it healed the gut. And so these things can help. Also, zinc is a great for the immune system, but also in tissue repair and healing these things up. Also, you got to get the things out of your life that are causing these things to break down, right? If you know now that these are the triggers, it's important to get them out of our life. And as we can see here, as I mentioned, 70% of the immune system is in the gut, and we can see right in here where my marker is are lymphatic vessels. They're called Peyer's patches, and they help get, here's the food getting absorbed, and the first stop is in the Peyer's patches, so we don't absorb things that are unhealthy. The next stop is for it to make its way to what's called the hepatic portal circulation. All the blood from the intestinal tract, the first stop is into the liver. And the liver has its own lymphatic vessels in here as well that can break down and clear out things to get them out of the system. So, but overburden these two immune system clearance tools, if we overburden them, they break down. They just can't keep up with the amount of work, and we get this autoimmune type disorder, or we get these vague symptoms that nobody can quite figure out. This is why the gut is so important to the rest of our health. You got to be a sleuth to figure out what's going on when people have vague symptoms. There's also food allergies, which can be triggered through a leaky gut, or they can be triggered just from eating the foods repetitively over and over and over again, and our body becomes sensitized to the same food. And some of the most common culprits are dairy and wheat and eggs and soy, and what's not on this list, corn. Those are slow IgG, immunoglobulin G stimulating allergies. It takes 1 to 4 days for those to trigger. And then there's the IgE food allergies, that are life-threatening: peanuts, nuts in general, shellfish, and for some people, fish. So this is a sign that the barrier that's supposed to keep things out is not intact. And these allergies, again, what do? Upregulate the immune system. Getting the immune system fired up, it starts to attack these proteins, which can look like our proteins, and then start to attract our own proteins in the joints, in the skin, in the brain, everywhere. And so we see immune system suppression, where people can't fight off infections, immune system upregulation, where they get autoimmune conditions, and a lot of it can be triggered also through food allergies. Then we move into the large intestine. Again, we talked about the microbiome that lives here, hundreds of trillions of cells, viruses, bacteria, protozoa. We get this from our mother when we're born. We're born with really almost none of this. As we come down the vaginal canal, we get inoculated to this bacteria. It's how it gets into our body. The first place is at birth. And so if we have C-sections, babies do not colonize with good probiotic or a good microbiome, good bacteria. In fact, they've done studies and they find that the babies born C-section are colonized with hospital bacteria, which we know is not a good thing. So this is a place that is important to have healthy bacteria. And so how do you get that? Well, by eating diverse foods, largely vegetables. And vegetables are what feed this bacteria. These bacteria, that's what they eat: undigested fiber from vegetables and fruits. And so if we're eating the standard American diet or low fiber foods, the fiber's not making it all the way into the lower small intestine, large intestine. And when the fiber doesn't make it down there, those bacteria don't have anything to eat. And when they don't have anything to eat, they start to die, or worse, they start to eat the mucosa of the intestinal tract, which could lead to gastrointestinal irritable bowel syndrome, potentially ulcerative colitis, and different damage to the intestinal tract. These bacteria are also killed with, yes, you guessed it, antibiotics. So when we take a large amount of antibiotics, it kills these bacteria, leaving us susceptible to other things taking hold and altering our digestive system. And I've seen this happen over and over again with people. Glyphosate is another problem. Again, it's not just killing bacteria higher up, it's killing it farther down as well. And again, I mentioned the standard American diet, low fiber diets are killing this. So we have to feed the flora really a diverse amount of vegetables. You can also get some transient benefit from things like kombucha or fermented foods like kimchi or sauerkraut. And then, you know, transiently, and I say this because most probiotics that we take will help colonize while we're taking them, but they don't generally stick around. what you see here is bacteria that stays, it's built in there. They line the intestinal wall. They protect the body from other things that shouldn't be there lining the intestinal wall. And so we've got to feed that stuff. And we can get some boost, again, through probiotics. But again, most of those don't stick around for the long haul. Also feeding that bacteria what are called prebiotics, things that we don't digest that are generally forms of sugar, artichokes, apple pectin, apple peel, onions, garlic. Those things feed the bacteria as well. So having that in your diet is important to keeping this intestinal tract healthy here, and being sure the bacteria are growing. Now, right, there's this gut-brain connection, and it's really amazing, as we see here in this image. Again, all this stuff ends up in our blood. All our blood ends up everywhere, including our brain. So this is how we get brain fog and brain fatigue and poor sleep and bad memory. And the inflammatory chemicals become systemic. And it's not just like, you know, you sprained your ankle and you got a red hot swollen area right around the sprain. That's inflammation. That's acute inflammation. That's powerful and healing inflammation, because that's what inflammation is. It's the first step of healing. But when it becomes chronic and systemic is when it becomes dangerous. And add that to autoimmune system issues, and you've got a real can of worms happening here. So the intestinal permeability starts. We get systemic inflammation. This inflammation goes to the brain. But you know what's really interesting? I mentioned the vagus nerve before. Vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10. It comes out of the brain. It supplies the stomach, the large intestine, the small intestine, some of the reproductive organs. But bacteria can make its way up the nerve and into the brain, crossing the blood-brain barrier, with some implications to Alzheimer's disease here. So this whole gut health thing is very important. And it's not that it's connected to every single system. Again, that blood that leaks, the things that leak into the intestinal tract, through the leaky gut, into the blood, circulates throughout the entire nervous system, throughout the entire body, up to the brain, into the joints, into the skin, you name it. It goes everywhere. This is important. This is why the gut is the connection point to the rest of the body. When I worked in a holistic clinic several years ago, we did hundreds of stool analysis. That was our first go-to diagnosis tool for just about any condition. It didn't matter what your symptoms were. We went to the gut and we did a 3-day stool analysis. And you're going to see here what that can show us here in just a minute. Now, what else is important with this is we have these circadian rhythms. This is when our digestive system is working and when it's not. Our body is designed to work with food and light. And those two things turn on and turn off the whole circadian rhythm, right? We get tired at night naturally. We wake up in the morning naturally. Unless there's some other problem preventing these things from occurring. But let's start here. In the morning is when our blood pressure rises. Melatonin secretion stops so that we can wake up. We're most alert. We generally have a bowel movement in the morning. And then we're most coordinated midday. Our reaction times and strength, if you want a good strong workout, occur here. Blood pressure is at its highest here. Melatonin starts to be released so we can go to sleep. But you know what's happening during this whole nighttime? Digestion stops. The pancreas stops releasing insulin. The digestive tract does not move food through. It just sits there. So eating late is really bad for our health. We know this from hundreds of studies. Weight gain, you become diabetic at night. The digestive system shuts down. People gain weight. Sleep gets interrupted. And when sleep gets interrupted, regeneration of the body slows down. Detoxification slows down. Testosterone and growth hormone production slows down in men. And so it's important to eat with our circadian rhythm. Now, I recommend, a 12-hour fast. Be done eating 3 hours before bed. If you're done eating 3 hours before bed, you're going to likely get a better night's sleep, potentially lose weight. And when in studies with mice and in some extent humans, when they do time-restricted feeding, you may know it as intermittent fasting, where they're done eating 3 hours before bed, sleep is better. Weight loss happens, and the microbiome gets healthier. So I recommend about a 12 to 14 hour intermittent fast. Be done eating 3 hours before bed. Eat breakfast at 9 o'clock, and do what you can to work with the circadian rhythm. Don't fight it. Don't eat late. Don't eat right before bed. If you're hungry, you're not going to die. You will sleep better, and you can get up and eat in the morning. Now, lastly, we mentioned infections, and this is where I think a lot of times, in my experience, traditional medicine can really drop the ball, because they will order a stool test, but they don't look at all the markers that specialty digestive labs can look at. We can look at how well is your pancreas releasing enzymes? Are you digesting and absorbing carbohydrates, fats, and proteins? Do you have leaky gut issues? Do you have an increase in inflammatory markers in the gut what is causing that inflammation? And then when we culture out what's in the stool, we can find things that will grow, and they might take 1, 2, 3 days, weeks to grow out. And so when we order specialty tests, we can see things that grow out that should not be there, and then find ways to kill these. Many times these labs not only will culture out what they see grow, but they'll also tell the physician what can help kill it, what antibiotic, what antifungal, what herbs, and that adds a lot of value, getting right to the addressing the root cause. These kinds of stool analysis are really important, really with chronic health problems. It's not always the first thing I go to, but if someone's having a lot of symptoms and the simple things that I've mentioned in this webinar so far aren't addressing the situation, then we order lab tests. Same here. We can see lipopolysaccharides upregulating immunoglobulin G here. So again, something's going on in the gut here. What are we going to do to deal with this, and how are we going to address it? Very valuable information. So that largely wraps up this webinar. Lots going on here. I hope that gave you a lot of information. Digestion starts in the mouth. We got to chew and mix with our saliva, especially if we're doing smoothies. We've got to make sure we don't neutralize stomach acids with iced things and lots of dilution with fluids. It's important to make sure if you have too much acid to have that evaluated, because a simple routine can kill that off, because too much acid is no good in the stomach. It's important to eat organic, non-GMO foods to avoid glyphosate and a lot of the other things that get absorbed into our intestinal tract. And really, again, backing up back to the stomach, not taking antacids, because that acid is one of the protective mechanisms of the small intestine to protect it from bacterial overgrowth that can wreak havoc throughout the body. And then as we move into the large intestine, again, we've got to avoid, to the extent that we can, antibiotics, and again, glyphosate and using non-GMO foods, and making sure we're eating high fiber diets so that bacteria that lives in there has something to live on. And it has to come from a whole food, plant-based diet. And that's what maintains this healthy balance. With that, things regulate. A daily bowel movement, 1 or 2 a day, is absolutely important. If you're not having a daily bowel movement, we reabsorb a lot of toxins that get into our body. the role of the large intestine to absorb water, and the longer undigested or digested food sits in there, the harder it gets and the more constipated you get. It's important to replenish the bacteria if you've been on a course of antibiotics, but even more importantly, eating the good whole food plant-based fiber in your diet to make sure that bacteria is fed. So it's important to not just know this now, but to make new decisions. And it really comes down to very basic things, things your mother taught you, things you hear about on the news. Well, I'll take that with a grain of salt. Things that I discuss in this webinar. There is no magic bullet. There is healing the gut, there's feeding the good bacteria, and that in and of itself can solve many, many, many health-related problems that are overlooked, that too many people suffer from. And I want to offer you a free strategy session because you're not going to get this from your physician. If you would like to talk to me for 30 minutes, not 30 seconds, 30 minutes, we'll find out where the weak link is, and I'll give you some suggestions on where to get started. This is just such a valuable resource. Schedule on my calendar here, reverse middle age /30 minutes. I'm glad to talk to you. We can get into the weeds about it. We can find likely a root cause of what's going on and make some very simple, basic recommendations. Again, I try to do that prior to ordering lab tests. I've looked at enough lab tests. I've done this with enough people that I can get to about 90% of root causes without a lot of tests. Then lastly, let me leave you with this. This is not a substitution for medical advice. If you have symptoms that are bothersome or causing you undue discomfort, seek the help of a physician. Our relationship during this does not connotate a physician-patient relationship. If we do work together, it's strictly informational, as is this piece of this webinar. It's strictly informational. Just disclaimers that need to be clearly understood in the role that I am not anybody's doctor during these webinars. I am glad to talk to you on an informational basis and see what we can do to help you be healthy. But if you have really serious symptoms and they're ongoing, really do seek the help of a professional and find out what's going on. And I really, really want to thank you for your time today. I know there's a million other things to do on a Saturday than sit here and listen to this. I hope I provided a lot of value and some insights on what could be going on, and that it really is important to look to the gut for root causes. If you get nothing else out of this, if you have an ongoing health problem, we've got to start in the gut, because a lot of times, more times than not, this is where things start. So I've recorded this. I'll be sure to get it out to others. And I really want to thank you for showing up here today and appreciate your time. Have a great day. Again, please connect with me here if you'd like a free 30-minute strategy session. I'd love to talk to you. All right. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.